Okay, so let's dive in. If you've ever, gotten your hands on one of those classic Tamiya RC buggies from the 80s, maybe like a Sand Scorcher or the Hornet,
Oh,
explained the plastic, the smell, just putting it together, pure nostalgia.
right.
But you probably also know that front wheel wobble, that like rattling looseness, it just feels a bit
hmm
off.
Oh, yeah. That's almost a signature for some of those kits, isn't it? And it's
Yeah,
not just, how it looks or feels. What you're mostly feeling there is what we call axial
with
play.
axial play, right?
The wheel moving in and out along the axle. It's different from, say, radial play, where the whole thing feels loose side to side, maybe from worn bearings.
Yeah.
This is that specific back and forth slop.
And looking at the sources, it seems like this wasn't just stuff wearing out over time. It actually kind of started right from the
Very
factory.
much. You got to remember, this was 1980s
Yeah.
manufacturing. Tolerances weren't quite what they are today. So you'd get tiny variations in the axle diameter, the inside of the wheel, the upright, and they all add up. Creates a gap right from the get-go.
A cumulative gap. Okay.
Exactly. And then you throw in the original bushings they came with.
Ah, those plastic or bronze
Well,
things?
they weren't exactly precision parts to begin with, and honestly, they wore down pretty quick, especially if you were actually running the car hard.
Hmm.
That wear just made everything worse, adding maybe some radial looseness, but definitely making that axial slop much, much bigger.
So it's not just annoying, this wobble actually makes things wear out faster. The sources mention that, right?
Absolutely. It's a bit of a destructive cycle. That constant in-out banging on the axle. It can wear down the axle shaft itself, which is usually a softer metal.
Hmm.
It can wallow out the hole in the plastic upright that holds the axle, and even damage the drive pinhole inside the wheel hub. The slop basically accelerates its own wear.
Wow. Okay, so the interesting fix that came up like almost straight away in the RC scene was just adding a washer.
A shim.
Yeah, a simple, thin washer, usually an M4 size for those front axles. You just slide it onto the axle, usually behind the wheel, before the pin or the hex adapter. And this wasn't just some, random garage fix people stumbled on.
No, it was so common and effective that CRP Custom Racing Products, a huge name in aftermarket parts back then, they actually included M4 axle washers specifically for this fix in their hashtag 5140 stainless wheel hardware set. That really validates it as a proper tuning technique.
Okay, so that's kind of our mission for this deep dive then. We want to unpack why this little washer works so well, what the performance benefits are, because getting rid of slop has to help, but also crucially, touch on the risks, because the sources suggest it's not quite as simple as just throwing a washer in there. There's a catch.
There really is. And connecting it all, you see this tiny, cheap washer becomes this really powerful lever, doesn't it? It can take that loose, sloppy front end and make it feel tight and precise. Huge difference in handling, huge difference in durability. But, and this is the big but, our sources hammer home, get it wrong, and you cause real problems. There's a definite procedural risk.
Okay, you mentioned risk. What is that main danger the sources warn about when you add this washer? It seems so harmless.
The big one, the absolute key thing to avoid, is creating excessive bearing preload.
Preload, meaning?
Meaning you're squeezing the bearings. See, the washer takes up the gap, that axial play.
Mm.
But if your washer is too thick, or maybe you use too thin ones when one was enough, you eliminate the gap and you start pushing the inner race of the outer bearing against the wheel and the outer race of the inner bearing against the hub carrier, or vice versa, depending on the setup. Basically, you're clamping down on the bearings sideways. They're not designed for that constant side load.
Ah, okay. So instead of spinning freely, they're being pinched.
Exactly.
It's
Pinched, constantly under pressure.
What happens then if you accidentally overshim it and create that binding? Sounds like bad news.
It is really bad, potentially very quickly. The sources are clear. First, you get massive friction. Friction creates heat, lots of it, fast. The bearings bind up. The wheel won't spin freely at all. You'll feel it if you tune it by hand. It'll feel rough, gritty, or just plain stuck. And if you try and run the car like that,
Mm.
catastrophic failure is almost guaranteed. Yeah, the heat can ruin the grease. The balls and races inside the bearing can deform, score each other.
Huh.
They can even basically weld themselves together in extreme cases. You could destroy a brand new set of ball bearings in literally minutes. Imagine spending all that time restoring your vintage beauty just to cook the front bearings instantly because the washer was like a tenth of a millimeter too thick.
Okay, so that's the disproportionate risk. A tiny error, big consequences.
Precisely.
So getting it right, it's not just about finding a washer, it's about finding the right washer or combination of thin shims.
Mm.
It needs precision,
Very good.
patience, and yeah, precision. It's often a trial and error thing. You add a shim, put the wheel on, tighten the nut gently, then check, is there still slop? If yes, maybe try a slightly thicker shim or add another very thin one. If no slop, great, but then spin the wheel. Does it spin absolutely freely, smoothly? No roughness, no binding, no gritty feeling.
That's the goal.
Yeah,
Zero play and zero binding.
exactly. Perfect free spin, but no in and out movement. You can take a few tries, swapping shims to get that perfect balance. And the sources suggest this is really something to tackle after upgrading to ball bearings, right? Not so much with the stock bushings.
Yeah, that's generally the best practice. Ball bearings themselves reduce slop compared to bushings, and they provide that consistent, precise foundation you need to really dial in the shimming. Trying to shim out slop on already worn bushings is kind of losing battle. Get the bearings in first, then fine-tune with the shims. And, understanding the quirks of your specific model helps too. But getting this detail right, it makes a world of difference to how that classic RC handles and how long everything lasts.
It really does show how one tiny, seemingly simple part can have such a huge impact, good and bad. It's fascinating. So, wrapping this up, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Thinking beyond RC cars, what other small, maybe overlooked components and systems we use every day might hold that kind of hidden power or carry a similar disproportionate risk if we don't understand them properly and handle them with care?